just a quick check that everybody is here for this room, for this workshop, Insights into National Housing First Platforms, because there was a little bit of a confusion in the rooms. So we're all in the right place. Please come close, close. We won't bite, promise. Okay. I guess that's as good as it gets. All right. So, despite the very formal setting, we want to have this as an informal workshop. And I'm supposed to look at the camera. This is being live streamed, so greetings to whoever is out there. And what we want to do is take advantage of having 5 fantastic people here who are all trying to do the same quite difficult job in different countries, which is to create, establish, maintain a national housing first network in one form or another. So, because it is a workshop, what we've decided is to give everyone an opportunity just to tell us a little bit about where they're from, what the sort of shape of their network is, where they're at, but then to really do this as a kind of question and answer session rather than as sort of formal presentations. And that also means that I'll get a chance to ask you questions, you guys will get a chance to ask each other questions, and we would love for you to also ask questions. And we also hope that we will definitely take some time to do a bit of small group discussion as well, because we have this giant space, we might as well use it. So maybe I will introduce myself briefly and quickly at the beginning. So I'm Samara Jones, and I'm the coordinator of the Housing First Europe Hub, which is a partnership of cities, organizations, housing providers, researchers, national ministries, who've come together since 2016, 2017 with the ambition to really work together to end homelessness and use Housing First as a way to start that conversation and to see Housing First as a step along the way towards ending Housing First and as a real driver for that. So we work on supporting newcomers to Housing First, to people managing Housing First and developing programs, but also with a real focus on supporting that idea that we need to change the system in which we operate to make sure that we really move to ending homelessness situation rather than just a managing homelessness situation. So one of the things that we do in our work as a Housing First Europe Hub is support, or at least try and bring together national networks on Housing First and I don't need to go into why they're important because I think that will be touched on now. And so we wanted to use this opportunity as a workshop where we can learn from you guys and also try and think about what more we might be able to do in the future to support the work of national networks. So I think I will hand over right away to Melanie. I'm gonna grab my computer.
It is working.
They're magic over there. They know what they're doing.
Oh, that's great. Hi everyone. I'm Melanie Schmit. I'm from the Netherlands, and I run together with my colleague Anke Jansen, run the Housing First network in the Netherlands. It's called Housing First Netherlands, and we promote and support the proven effective way of doing Housing First, and also, like Samara said, the systemic change that is needed to end homelessness sustainably. And we are in the forefront of this new way of acting and thinking in the Netherlands. And of course, we do this with all of you, all the people who are in this global movement to make this happen. And this year I've been doing work on Housing First for like about a decade, and but since last January we actually became an independent foundation because we assessed that would be a better and maybe faster way to achieve that systemic change. So let's hope that it turns out that way. And the things that we do are different activities. Through our movement, we do advocacy. Also, we provide support to all parties that implement or further develop Housing First. So like municipalities, housing corporations, care organizations. We do a lot on knowledge exchange and learning, like our national platform for stakeholders. There are mainly a lot of care organizations, but we are now also involving housing corporations, municipalities. We also have a university course on housing first in the Netherlands. And last but not least, we do research to continue to strengthen the scientific basis of housing first in the Netherlands.
Hi everyone, I am Giuseppe Dardes, I come from Italy. I am the coordinator of HFI, Housing First Italy, the Italian community of Housing First. Our network is called Housing First Italy and was born in 2020 at the height of the pandemic to take up and relaunch the work of Housing First Italian network. The network, born in 2014, associated private social entities and public bodies interested in experimenting the housing first approach in our country. In practice, it was thanks to the meeting with FEANTSA and exchanges arising from moments like this that it was decided to launch a nationwide experimentation. The network, set up within FEAPS, was open to those who wanted to invest with their own resources for third sector organization or with budgets drawn from general budget for public bodies, or training and accompaniment consultancy to start up housing first projects in their territory. From that first and fruitful experimentation, conferences, research, publication, it was decided to stabilize and consolidate the space for the exchange of practice, training, and study and monitoring for those in Italy who had chosen or intended to choose to work with Housing First. Today, the community has 56 members, distributed in 14 regions and 35 cities. Practically, the whole national territory is represented with a prevalence of adherents in northern Italy. What we do? Community coordinated by a trainer, I am a trainer, could only focus on training. But our offer, always being evaluated and improved, today includes basic courses, webinars, community of practice, continuing educational school, operational coaching. And in the first phase of the network, data collection and monitoring were included in the overall cost for members to contribute to the work of the network consisting in training, research, and monitoring, as well as communication. With the community to make entry more affordable, we opted to give everyone the opportunity to be the tailor-made package, separating training from research and monitoring in the costs. The unintended effect was a drop in membership in the monitoring programs. This made the work of colleagues of FEOPS Observatory much more complex and difficult to sustain financially. How we do function? HFI has an agile, a clever way of saying poor and limited structure. As already mentioned, I am the coordinator. I have a part-time contract as a consultant and trainer for FEOPS. The entire FEOPS secretariat, in all, we are 7 members with only 1 employee, while the others are, like me, consultants with part-time contracts. Alongside us in secretariat, other colleagues work on individual projects. In my case, often days or entire training projects. In particular, I am supported by a colleague, Margherita Neri, a certified HF trainer who for 8 hours a week plans and carries out the community activities with me. For the community, we give priority to fellow trainers who have completed the train-the-trainer training. offered by the hub. Thank you really for all you do. Let's talk about money and stop my contribute. Community membership costs a symbolic 120 euro per year. This small economic base allows us to support a small part of personal costs. The rest of the resources come from training activities, both specific on housing first, on generic, on homelessness, and proposed by Ethiops. This is our picture.
Great, thank you.
Okay, hello, I'm Juha Soivio, I'm from Finland. And together with my colleagues Maria and Mia, we are coordinating the Finnish Housing First National Development Network. It sounds quite similar to the other ones. I will talk about what we do. Finland has had the national program since 2008 for ending or reducing and ending homelessness based on the Housing First model. And a decade ago, in 2013, the network was established to kind of help this program to become true. The aim was to implement and scale up Housing First nationwide in Finland, and that's basically what we still do. The focus of our activities has changed a bit on our journey, but the basic thing is still the same: implement and scale up Housing First. We do a lot of trainings. We do have different bodies for development work. We cooperate with cities, NGOs, service providers, ministries, and whoever is a stakeholder in ending homelessness. We try to get them involved in our activities. I would describe it as a kind of open platform for everyone who is doing stuff with homeless people and trying to end homelessness. It's open in the sense that agencies contact us and we welcome them, and we contact the agencies and invite them to work with us. It's free, and we kind of try to find solutions and kind of share good practices for everyone to use. We are coordinated by Y Foundation, but our funding is from the sorry, I have to look at the paper. Funding Center for Social Welfare and Health Services in Finland. It's basically lottery money. Our salary is paid from that grant. What else? Yeah, basically that's we can continue afterwards.
Thank you very much. I'm Mike Allen. I'm Director of Advocacy in Focus Ireland, which is one of the leading housing and homelessness organisations in Ireland. And we coordinate or facilitate a Housing First platform in Ireland. It's a slightly different story than the other stories in terms, and I think that one of the big differences is the role which the state directly, the national government, takes in Housing First. So Housing First started in Ireland at a pilot level in 2008 and so on, and then in Dublin there was a major program which was trying to get about 100 people, and then that was pushed up to 300 people. And about 5 years ago, a national program on Housing First was rolled out, and it was done as every municipality was given funding to do a contract on Housing First in collaboration with the health authorities. So there's a formal tendering process through which Housing First programs were set up right across in every town and city in the country. And at the same time, first of all, a national director of Housing First was appointed, and then subsequently a national office for Housing First was set up in a national state agency. So it's a state employee, a state function to promote and maintain standards and drive Housing First. So all those are really good things, because that's sort of a lot of the advocacy that we do, is that the state should take responsibility for this rather than it be an NGO or charity sort of situation. But success has its own challenges. So the question then is for the voluntary sectors, for organisations like ourselves, what is our role in Housing First? So the platform in Ireland arose really when the Housing First Hub was set up with FEANTSA and the Y Foundation and the Belgian government, as I heard this morning, which is great to hear them, that the hub has been so successful that they wish to claim their involvement in it. That's really good. For the success as many fathers. Folks Ireland was one of the founding group members of the hub, and in Ireland we were saying, like, okay, this gives us sort of advantage, knowledge, access to training and skills and so on about Housing First. Do we see that as a competitive advantage against all the other homeless organisations, or do we see that as a core set of skills that everybody who's working against homelessness should have access to? And we took the second position. We said, look, we want to share this. And that's why we took the initiative of setting up the platform, and all the voluntary organisations which deliver Housing First in Ireland, in the Republic and in the North are members, which is quite unusual, particularly DePaul being the main northern player. But it's really difficult then to work out, well, as it develops and there's a national office, what are the things that we should be doing, and what are the things, in fact, the Housing First National Office is going to do anyway? So we don't want to duplicate, we don't want to get into conflict with what's happening at the National Office. So what is our role? So there's a really strong consensus across the voluntary organisations that there is a role for this voluntary sector platform. And there's also support for that from the National Housing First Director and his team, that they see the real role for the voluntary sector. It's just that nobody is exactly clear what it is. And it's a matter of working that over time. So it's not funded. It's not a legal entity, the platform. It's a sort of a voluntary association of everybody who's involved. We meet on a monthly basis and we exchange experiences and information and identify particular problems that are emerging and see where we can work together on them. So at the moment, for instance, there's an issue, there's a long-term issue. The relationship between the local authority and the health service in each of the different towns and cities is different. And we're trying to get a close picture of exactly what is the relationship, so that health authority might be providing a staff member who is their employee and is seconded into the Housing First project, or they might be providing money and the Housing First project is employing the person, or they might have a part-time person who's available. So there's different ways. So we're trying to get a picture of where that is, and then that allows us to say, well, actually, which ones of those work better, which is most effective, and so on. So that we're trying to constantly identify that. The just final point I'd make is, it happens in the context where 5-year tendered contracts to deliver Housing First. So we're now coming to the end of the first round of tenders, and everybody who's in the platform is aware that their organisation is going to be involved in a winner-takes-all in each area, in each city, one organisation, or one, if you go into a voluntary partnership with one other partner, but one tender wins the contract for Housing First. And that it's very hard to maintain a level of coordination and cooperation and sharing of problems when you know that in some time in the next few months, you are going to be required to fight to the death with the person across the table in order to get your access to delivering the Housing First programme in Cork or in Dublin or in Galway. And we're trying to negotiate, trying to see ways in which, are there ways in which attenders can be approached which will reduce that conflict or tension between the member organisations and build collaboration over time. So.
Thank you. Were we supposed to get questions right away, or
no? I mean, the first question was just to sort of like introduce yourself and your national network, provide a snapshot of the situation in your country and some of the practical aspects of the network. And then we'll a second round of questions will dive more deeply into the challenges, and I have lots of questions for Mike on that one, because it's always, I know
that's good.
I know you don't have answers necessarily, but I find it fascinating. So please.
Well, the Swedish situation is more like we started like 2013 with some enthusiastic souls that wanted to do, housing first, or were doing housing first, and they wanted to gather once a year and have a conference on that. And it's been going on like that since 2013, and somewhere when the European Housing First Hub started also, we became partners. The Swedish Association of City Missions became a partner also, like Mike and some other people too. And we realized that we should build a Swedish national Housing First Hub first, and then we could in some way collaborate to have the national Housing First network inside the hub, or the opposite around. But we haven't really achieved that yet. It has been difficulties. And last year we got a new homeless strategy in Sweden also, and in that sense we also have like more players along that are doing stuff by themselves, because there's a organization also that gathers all the municipalities in Sweden that are inside, that have their own kind of a group where members can or municipalities can gather in that place to talk about housing first. We have the Housing First network. We have the Housing First hub. So it's a lot of, like, it's a bit of a mess actually right now. So and it's always good to meet Melanie, because I remember I was when you were supposed to start your national Housing First network. I was there and we talked about European Housing First network and stuff like that. And now you have proceeded to be your own, like enterprise, and doing this very well, I think, because it's we see you everywhere now, and on social media and stuff like that. But I think we have the resources in Sweden in actually to achieve something really good now. But in order to gather every resource into getting into one unit like you have in Ireland would be quite good, I think, for us. And it can't be built on enthusiasm all along, because then it's going to die, like it's when people are not working there anymore, it's going to slowly evaporate and diminish. So in that sentence, so hopefully in 1-2 years we're going to say that now we have everything in place and we're doing really good now on our fusion with the Housing First network and also with the Swedish Housing First hub.
Okay. Thanks. I think it's interesting that the shape of the network is quite different in different places, but like obviously a lot of the objectives are shared. And I think some of you already touched on this, but I think it's also interesting to use this very, again, gigantic space, but it's a safe space, and it would be just nice to talk about some of the things you find most challenging in what you're doing. And then I have another question about impact, right? So maybe just talk a little bit about the challenges, and then I had another question about where you think you'll have the most impact. So do you want to start again, Melanie?
Yeah, maybe I can start by saying some things about the practical side also of the Dutch network, because I heard you talking about that, and I thought, yeah, maybe you would like to know how that is organized in the Netherlands as well. So around staff, Anke Jansen, who I mentioned earlier, and I lead the network. We have a supervisory board who checks whether Anke and I reach the goals that we set. And in addition, we have 2 freelancers who provide our organization the internal support all year long. And they both have lived experience. And that is something that we kind of made policy in our organization, that we hire people who have lived experience, and not just for their lived experience, but on all the positions that we have. And now starting this summer, we will also have Rick, who is starting, and he will lead the Housing First Academy. We are already doing a lot on training and courses, but we are going to professionalize it even more with Rick as a project leader on this. For funding, we receive funding from a fund in the Netherlands called Kansfonds. And they offer us with this finance a basis to build up our organization coming years. And they do more than just give money. They are really our partners in our mission. So we've been really fortunate with that. And this year we also get a subsidy from the Ministry of Health to help municipalities to translate the national strategy that has been launched. I will say something about that as well. And support them in implementing it. And lastly, we also have income from things like training and consultancy. And so those are the main income streams that we have. And as I said before, we once originated from care organizations as a platform, kind of like what the others were telling us. So that is our origin. And now that we are our own foundation, we're going to look at if we can broaden that to get all the stakeholders and partners you need for a successful rollout of Housing First to get involved. And you were asking about challenges.
Yeah. If you...
Yeah, and maybe something about the Netherlands, like how the situation is right now. We have about 40,000 people estimated to be homeless in the Netherlands, but that is a very conservative figure. It's probably more in the 100,000s if we did a right count. In response to the sharp increase and a lot of advocacy for years by the Housing First movement, there is a new national strategy since last December, and it focuses on Housing First. That was a very good step. There are also a lot of challenges left, even though we got the first step that it's national policy. There are currently 49 Housing First practices in the Netherlands, and those are in 93 different municipalities. And it represents a cautious starting point. I know it might sound a lot, but the reality is that only 6% of homeless people in the Netherlands get access to Housing First. So there's still a lot of different other accommodation for people experiencing homelessness. And hopefully we will make big steps coming years. And I think one of the challenges is related to this new policy. I think the first challenge is that it didn't come with a policy on housing. So it's a policy from the Ministry of Health. And we need a really good plan on how there's going to be housing available to match this plan. So that is a big challenge. And also, and this is a little bit hard to explain in English, but the Dutch government chose to not call it housing first, but translate the word into Dutch. And you can probably say, yeah, what's the problem? But the problem with that is that they don't enforce that it has to be the proven effective way of housing first. So they leave a lot of freedom for municipalities to do it in whichever way they see fit. And so that presents a challenge for us to really convey every part of the Netherlands that you should do it in the proven effective way. So I would be very interested also, I'm very interested in why you are all here, because maybe you want to start a national platform, or that would be interesting to hear. And also, maybe you have thoughts on this, because this might happen in your country as well, and you might have some really good ideas for me. So.
Thank you. As Melanie, also I start with report a synthetic country situation to represent our choice about challenges. The official number of homeless people in our country refers to 2014 survey. That year it was estimated at 50,700 people in homelessness, people experiencing homelessness. For the two most severe ethos categories, only for the two. We are certain of a general increase in the phenomenon, but we are lobbying our government to launch a new official survey. We had a strong necessity to have new number and the real number of homeless in Italy. On Housing First, for example, the number of people accommodated is higher than the number of people accommodated by community member organizations. For these people accommodated in projects unrelated to our work, we have a difficulty in estimating and monitoring. For example, on the adherence to the model, fidelity scale. Political scenario, center-right government, signs of blaming poverty. Alarm over the sharp drop in citizenship, income, and the real risk that it will be taken away from homeless people. This last situation could regard many housing first projects that value the contribution of citizenship, income, and an additional special contribution on housing. For many entities, it will be a step backwards of many years compared to the progression of a method. Activation of homeless people and co-participation achieved in recent years through the adoption of Housing First. Overall, with respect of policy for serious adult exclusion, there is a risk of a contraction of proximity activities of reception and the integration paths, second level. At the same time, we have a very strong increase of European funds, recovery fund, after the pandemic. Yesterday, Frank speak about Italian model. There is some problems in this Italian model. In particular, two types of projects called service center for homeless people and housing first and temporary housing in the same point. When we found out, we had the same reaction as you. Joy and surprise for the first part, housing first. Finally, the government has chosen to invest in it, sees it strategically, promotes its adoption at a territorial level beyond the usual perimeter of the big cities. Immediately, afterwards, sadness and bewilderment. Why just expose temporary with housing first? Why this contradiction in terms? FEOPS was asked by the ministry to make an evaluation of these projects. In the coming months, we hope to be able to monitor and support the territorial ambits to help them give the right name of the activities. For example, by not confusing housing first and temporary housing, and thus offer our support to make housing first projects as faithful as possible to approach as codified at European and international level. Wish us luck. We will need it for the next time. Our challenges. The first for us is improve and grow community membership and participation, strengthen listening and connection with adherents, increase membership, promote an horizontal exchanges and twinning, study visits and comparison between organizations on the Italian territory and in the future European by exploiting dedicated calls for proposals. We think to activate interest groups to deepen crucial areas issues for the development of Housing First. Now in Italy, there is an interest on Housing First for young people and support to LGBT people. The structure and partly enrich the training offer with a stable and clear program during the year. It's amazing the idea of Housing First Academy. It's a really interesting name, interesting way to promote training. Promote loyalty to the model and encourage experimentation and social innovation. This will be a demanding challenge because we will have to help those who are planning and are close to realizing the 250 projects financed by PNRR, Italy National Recovery and Resilience Plan, to distinguish Housing First from the other forms of housing, and there were possible to use those funds to start up Housing First projects and then give them sustainability and continuity with different funds. We hope to help them for this. This is an interesting point, strengthening the credibility of Housing First approach in Italy, data collection, and European international connection. Since we were born in 2013, two things have been important for our credibility: study and research through monitoring and data collection on Housing First projects, and the European connection, the participation in this hub and the training of 7 operators in different editions of Train the Trainer. Today, we must quickly resume by finding ways of funding data collection and the publication of a report on the results of Housing First projects in our country. This is a really strong challenge for us. And connecting with Europe at times like these, rather than with the training and exchanges, strengthens our credibility in Italy because it is perceived that we are part of a larger movement with the international authority. And to end, finding resources to give sustainability to the project in the coming years. For us, this is an important challenge. Thanks.
Thank you. I wish you good luck. Yeah. A snapshot of challenges. Yeah.
Especially because when we look to Finland, we think they've sorted it out. It's all done. So I think it's interesting from your perspective, what are the challenges that you still face and that the network can have an impact on?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that it's not done yet. It's kind of one of the challenges is that as Melanie said, we started as a quite intensive group of NGOs and service providers, and we managed to create a kind of, I think it was quite good culture of collaboration between the NGOs and service providers, and with the kind of the national strategy, including the big cities and the ministries, and this kind of collective effort. There was kind of you could feel the sense of spirit that we are doing this together. I think that one of the challenges right now, as you said, that we are like close to the end. At the moment, there's in 2022, the statistics said that there are about 3,700 homeless in Finland. 1,100 of them being long-term homeless people, and this is kind of a situation that there's a you have to keep the kind of spirit up, that it's still important, that kind of try to avoid the feeling that okay, we did it, because we didn't. It's not yet, we are not there yet, and it kind of creates also a threat to the culture of collaboration too. Partly because it's so close, that we are so close to ending homelessness. The other thing is, well, actually, as I was listening to Hammer in the keynote speak today, she was speaking about integrating homelessness or homeless problems into every sector. It's kind of the task of every sector and service. And when this happens, and when you try to kind of make it a part of every sector, then you kind of are dealing with prevention, you're dealing with housing, counseling, you're dealing with things that are not quite nicely put as housing first. So you kind of have to keep on the discussion on what's housing first, what does it mean, and why are we doing this, even though we are not kind of directly involved in support work or kindly doing things with homeless people, but also with people who are under the threat of becoming homeless. What was my? I guess the point was that this is also a threat to the kind of erosion of the common understanding of what we are doing and the importance of still doing it. There was a change in our system in the beginning of the year. Earlier on, the communities and the cities were responsible for housing and the support work, the health and social work. So it was in the hands of the same kind of agency. But there was we established a new level of management. It's kind of regional management, and this meant that the housing is still on the responsibility of cities and municipalities, but the social services and the health services are on the responsibility of the new kind of larger areas. And this is kind of blow to the kind of integrated way of thinking, if you think of homelessness, because as Melanie and you were talking about the importance of availability of affordable housing. So now it's under the different door or different, and this is a big challenge for the network also. We have to kind of make new contacts, be prepared to invite different bodies to take part in our work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks. It's good to know that there's still work to be done in Finland. It's still an inspiration, but you haven't quite finished.
Presumably, as you get closer to ending homelessness, more and more of the work doesn't need to be labelled homeless. Like I remember years ago when we were first starting, I suppose, our current phase of work in Focus Ireland, we had a seminar about prevention of homelessness, and Volker came over from the observatory to talk about prevention of homelessness, and he was listening to the debate, and we were saying all these services needed to prevent families in particular from becoming homeless, but young people and so on. And he was asked, well, what are the equivalent services in Germany on these? And Volker said, well, we have a lot of the services you're talking about, but we don't call them homelessness prevention services, we just call them social services. And that really stuck with me as a sort of, there's a lot that the homeless sector can sort of end up trying to make things that shouldn't be about homelessness. Like, we do lots of youth services in Focus Ireland, and there's a lot of effort to make sure that they aren't youth homeless services, they're just youth services to prevent people becoming homeless. And so one of the ironies or paradoxes that you do a lot of work to prevent homelessness, but in doing that, you add the label of homelessness in. So preventing using even the word homelessness might be. Anyway, that's a diversion.
But that's where I think housing first helps, because you can yeah,
It's about the housing, and it doesn't mention homelessness. And, I talked about the challenges facing the platform, I think, before, and I can say more about that if people want to, but I think it's more interesting perhaps the challenges facing housing first, is what you want to talk about now. So the biggest problem, I think, in Ireland, everybody would agree, is we don't just have a homelessness problem, we have a housing crisis. I think lots of other countries have it as well. And we have a particular problem with it because we completely stopped building housing of all forms during the crash, but we kept on. The population is continuing to grow, partly through inward migration, returning Irish people, other people coming to work. The economy is booming, and the population is growing, and that's huge demand on housing. The government has introduced a rule that Housing First can only use one-bed apartments. So not only do we not have many housing units, but we have decided that the only ones that we can use for Housing First are the ones that we have the least of, because the private sector doesn't build one-bedroom units, and the public service, public housing, has historically not built one-bedroom units of any number. So that is a huge self-imposed barrier. A lot of towns would have only a certain number of one-bedroom units, and all the blocks of apartments where there are one-bedroom units already have Housing First or other supported housing tenants in them, so you've reached the sort of threshold of maximum density. So that's a huge problem. There's various measures being put in place to build more, but if you're not just looking for housing, you're building the housing. That's quite a long-term plan, and obviously you can't build a block of 10 one-bedroom apartments and put 10 Housing First people in them. You've got to build the 10 apartments, and then you're only going to get a quarter of those filled with Housing First people. So it's a very low ratio of units to housing. So that's one challenge. And as I say, in our view, and shared by a number of people in the voluntary sector, quite a self-imposed problem. Right? There's not a lot of housing, but there's more two-bedroom units, which are quite small anyway. A second challenge is around staffing. So one of the peculiarities of Ireland is why we have this housing homeless crisis is the economy is booming. There's lots of changeover in staff, both in the voluntary sector. Most of the homeless organisations have very significant vacancies levels, like 20% empty places and so on, because they're trying to fill the vacancies, because people are moving on to employment in the public sector, where salaries are higher and people get pensions and so on. So you're getting skilled people constantly moving out of the sector, and we are funded by the public sector to do some of the same jobs, but they give us less money than they provide the job themselves. It's a mad system, But in the local authority system, there's also quite a lot of changeover of staff, which means that training becomes a hugely problematic area. You train somebody to get an understanding of Housing First. It's very different than the way that municipalities look at housing and social problems. Housing First is a very different way of looking at it. They get it, and then they're gone. And then there isn't a training, a sort of a unified training program in the system for the reasons I've mentioned before. There's also the third sort of issue you'd mention is exactly how do you integrate the health system, mental health system, with the housing system? It's the heart of Housing First, that integration, and it's so at a national level there's a strong commitment to it, but both those systems are quite autonomous at local level. They're not controlled centrally, so you can ask the local health services to integrate with the housing services and have a policy for it, but you have very little. You can't instruct them to. You can't make them do it. So that's working out that locally level. Sometimes it's brilliant. In lots of areas it's brilliant. In some places it's quite challenging, and sometimes it just depends on the people, and then somebody moves in it. And so that's just making it systematic. The fourth challenge, and last challenge I'd mention really, and not everybody would share this view, this would be a Focus Ireland view, some would share it or not, is Ireland has a very effective, we've got almost 900 people on Housing First tenancies. Okay, so it's quite a big growth over the years. There's about 12,000 individuals are homeless in Ethos 2 and 3. There's only about 100 people rough sleeping. So it's a very small group. But the Housing First program is really just for single people. Okay, there's a single, primarily older adults by definition. But you have to have been long-term homeless and with chronic support needs to be eligible for Housing First. So if you're 21, you can't be long-term homeless because you haven't been an adult for long enough. So young people are excluded on that basis, and families, even who have a very substantial family homelessness problem, even if they've got complex support needs and the parents aren't included in the program. Okay, and that's quite a distinct policy, government policy decision, on the basis that they want to solve this problem of the integration with the health service. And essentially what they're saying is, look, we want to get that right. If we start broadening it and bringing in different categories, we will lose the focus on that issue, and we want to deliver this first. That's the explanation, and we still think it should be broadened. But if you say it's for single people, then the total number of homeless people is, single people, is around 7,000. So we've got 900 people in Housing First, and a commitment to increase that by another 600 over the next couple of years. But as Housing First has gone up substantially, the actual number of single men has gone up even, of single people has gone up even faster. So you're not having an effect of, you're not seeing the benefit because it's happening in the context of a housing and homelessness crisis. It's different people, and the chronically most vulnerable people who've been homeless for a long are definitely out of homelessness, but they're being replaced by a new flow in, and that. So the narrowness of the definition of Housing First is obviously a problem if, as we do and others, work with families with complex support needs or young adults with complex support needs who are excluded from it. But it's also a problem in terms of systematizing the approach of Housing First. So in Housing First Hub, we've sort of talked about a problematic approach which sees Housing First as just another program along with other programs. So we continue doing all the things we do, and we add Housing First to the mix rather than we change the whole mix. So Ireland, I would say, is a particular case of doing an extreme case of Housing First as a program amongst any others, but doing that program very well. Yes. So it's not a bad story, it's just a paradoxical story.
Yeah.
Thank you. Interesting to hear about Ireland also. But when I said before, we have a Housing First Hub in Sweden, and we've been running that, and we are an NGO also, and we've been doing that as a project first, and then the pandemic came and was a bit slow on the development, but last year we decided we should hire someone who should coordinate the hub and make sure that we could do trainings, and now we sell trainings, so we don't get any other funds, but we sell training to get some money in that sense. And we are doing some following up also on the municipalities where we sell training to see what they need also. Because we, as you all know, we decided in the European Housing First Hub that we should go for a new vision where we should change the system instead of making a lot of new small Housing First projects instead. And that's a challenge or problem. I don't like the word challenge. It's I dislike it really. It's a problem that because as an NGO we can't be the one who's telling the municipalities to how to change the system. It must come from somewhere else. Or from the municipalities themselves, or from the government, should have that in our strategy to say that you should work with Housing First, but in order to do that, you must maybe look over your homeless system, how you're doing that. And that's a problem. I think it's I can see it it happening all over. And Sweden is 290 municipalities also, so it's a lot of municipalities to talk to and to talk with. And we also have now the government has ordered the National Board of Health and Welfare to achieve these goals that are in the strategy also, and it must be much clearer, I think, also. I don't know what the point is really here, but I know when you said that, Melanie, about housing first, it's not you have a Dutch word for it instead of housing first and stuff like that. Well, we have it too also in Sweden, of course, but it's a problem when the government doing stuff, well, good stuff, but not really think them through, because that could give long-term problems that will take so long time to change, because it's but still it's good that they do something, but it's a problem that we can't really achieve what we want to achieve. And with our problem, as I said also before, when we can't really make a fusion also with the hub and the network as we have wanted to do it, we haven't really, like, it feels like we're doing stuff but in different places. So there is still a problem, but there are resources, we can do it, but we have to make sure that we are speaking the same language, all of us. So, but changing the system is easy to say, but what does it mean also for a municipality? So, well, thank you.
So, okay. Yeah, it's on.
There is another challenge that I don't tell before. Today, our federation, FEANTSA, asked us to valorize the specific know-how of housing first, so that it can inspire and orientate experimentation and adaptation also with other targets. Making the challenge is making housing first a node in the political network on the housing challenge. There is a growing mobilization to address the problem of accessibility of housing affordable. For example, with the creation of a national networks on the issue of housing policies. And with housing for HEFI, our community, we want to be able to tell the need and the value of being able to give space also to the right of homeless with successful experience of housing first. This is an interesting challenge for us.
Yeah. No, it's on.
I just want to. Oh, sorry. I just want to mention also that we've done a survey or a mapping on homelessness also this year, but we're not going to get the results until next year. And we're only doing this every 6 years in Sweden. So it's kind of when I think of Ireland doing it once a month. And it takes 8 months to produce results also from the mapping. It could be done better also 2023 when we live in a digital world, but it is what it is, and that's also one thing we hope that we can say that the next time we are doing much better. But I don't think every month is a very good way of doing mapping either, but maybe once a year or once every 2 years is enough, I think.
So I wanted to, but think we'll go into a format where we're going to talk in some smaller groups, if that's okay with you guys, and we'll move off the stage, or we can invite everyone on the stage. And I think in the smaller groups, I'd like people to sort of, all of you, and you guys too, to think about, where's the impact that national networks is having? Like, what are the sort of, where do you see in, like, some of you've had a national network for a shorter or a longer period of time, but we've talked about the problems, the challenges. We can put both the word challenge and the problems aside for a minute and think about, where is the impact? Where are you having impact in terms of systems change, in terms of, accepting that we all operate within the system, so we have to be part of the change as well. We can't wait for someone else to change the system. So is there impact that you've seen with your national network? And I think it's also really useful if we break into groups so that we can just have some sort of smaller discussions from your own contexts where you are. It's useful for us to know, all of us, like, do you also have a national network? Are you also working in these kinds of ways? I don't know if we have anyone from Scotland still in the room, but they have some really interesting tools that they use with their national network, not necessarily a survey it's a survey about the impact that that Housing First is having. And I think that that's something that is interesting. I don't know how transferable it is, but I think that it's interesting to think about. So it's a very weird space, this room, I know. I apologize for that, and I will get Robbie to buy me a drink afterwards. So how about if we split into, there's not loads of us, so what if we split into 3 groups for discussion, and we could have one in the corner back there, maybe one down here, or one in that back corner and one in this sort of front corner, okay? And there's 5 of you, so 2 of you get to go with partners, and one person has to go all by themselves. But feel free to split up. So please, let's make it interactive, and you don't have to use a microphone in this small group session, I promise. So we'll send one group to the corner there. We'll have one group down here and one group over there. So choose to go wherever you wish.